10 minutes. Quit fooling yourself. The addiction has you running in circles and is robbing you of your rich, full life. It's exhausting your energy because you're on an emotional roller coaster. Admit it to yourself and move on. If your friends are worth a shit, they'll support you. If they don't, it's time to make some new ones. I don't drink addictively anymore, but I still love dirty, stinky, hole-in-the-wall bars. They're my temples. You don't have to give up the things you love surrounding the addictive act unless it aids you too much, makes it too easy for you. Then just find some other place you love. I love my couch, too. I'm now addicted to being in the moment, but I'm okay with that because in order to achieve this, I have to participate fully in life. It's a challenge, but I'm accepting it with each action towards making this podcast a reality. 6. Work to move beyond looking at yourself and others as simply good or bad. We are complex creatures living in a complex, scary, beautiful, confusing world. This creates a lot of situations where ethics and decision-making can be really tricky. Survival looks different in different contexts, and people will generally do what they think needs to be done in order to survive. I tend to view people as possessing varying levels of suffering, and this has a major influence on behavior. And in my opinion, the only thing suffering deserves is compassion. 7. Create your own definition of what it means to be successful. Money isn't the problem. It's suffering from the illusion that accumulating resources will make you happy that's the issue. And few people across the entire spectrum of humanity don't suffer from this. The rich just have more privilege. Sharing resources. This has a positive effect on our mojo. Invite someone over for dinner. Maybe your coworker you called an asshole. Success for me is living a rich life free from fear. Living in love so I can pass this love on to others. This is a huge challenge and I fail every day. But life is a dull thing if it possesses no challenges, so I'm up to the task. 8. Don't take things personally. Miserable people love to blame others for their misery. This is passing the buck. Only you can make yourself miserable. From a biological perspective, if you hate in others what you fear in yourself, what happens when you fear nothing of yourself? It's ecstasy. One of the reasons for imbibing in delicious adult beverages is that it lowers inhibitions. It lowers your ability to perceive people's reaction to your actions, to be less susceptible to people judging the fuck out of you. I have to be drunk to dance. Sound familiar? People that aren't willing to shake their ass are more prone to judge the fuck out of you because they're pansies. Tell them to dance or go the fuck home. People that judge you aren't worth your precious time space. People will try to fuck with your energy either purposely or inadvertently, either positively or negatively, and I argue you can't even take the positive energy people personally. Everyone has bad days. What will happen when that person is low? How will they affect you then? What happens when that happy person dies? Who is going to make you happy then? It's obviously not going to be you because you rely on external forces for your happiness. And if you rely on someone else to make you happy, you will end up draining that person of their light. And why would you want to do that to such a beautiful person that you love? Say your spouse comes home from work, is stressed out, and is an asshole to you. This has nothing to do with you. They're suffering and trying to alleviate that suffering by passing it off. Happens all the time. That's an easy example because the linear time of when the original suffering occurred and when it reared its beautiful ugly head were so close to one another. Consider the spouse that gets pissed at you because they're watching TV when they were 5 and saw a show depicting rich, dignified people having a nice, clean house, and he was poor, and the house was a train wreck, and this brought great sorrow to him. Fast forward 50 years, and you are clueless as to why your spouse is so grouchy when the house is untidy, and it's because of something that happened 50 fucking years ago. Here's the funny thing about our beings, these amazing vessels we inhabit. It doesn't work on linear time as much as our delusional culture does. So if you experience some suffering, quote, a long time ago, end quote, and you never have properly healed from it, your beautiful psyche acts as if it happened yesterday. I came across the notion of not taking things personally from a wise little book called The Four Agreements, A Practical Guide to Personal Freedom by Miguel Ruiz. 9. Be silly. I don't believe there is a more effective revolutionary act towards suffering than this. 10. Cultivate a healthy relationship to your privilege or lack thereof. All of us fall somewhere along the line of the privilege scale. As you know, I have privilege dripping from my every pore. Sometimes I slip on it and fall flat on my face. I have allowed myself to become terribly guilt-ridden for this. Feeling guilty only leads to self-destructive behaviors, including thoughts. And this is completely fine, except that I have chosen to live, and therefore it is no service to me. And I'm sure there is a trainload of stuff that reaches to the moon and back that annoys the hell out of black folks concerning white privilege. If I had to guess what one of those things is, it's that all a white person is able to do with all their damn privilege is feel guilty about it. Boo fucking who. As the saying goes, get off the cross, we could use the wood. One of the most effective things a privileged person can do is realize they don't know a goddamn thing. To acknowledge that privilege is a real thing with real effects in the world. Therefore, they will quit trying to tell other people what to fucking do. And this is beautiful. This is wondrous. Being happy means you're less likely to be oppressive, and that's the best way for you to be an ally. As for those of you on the lower rungs of privilege, cultivating a victim mentality has similar life-sucking effects. Yes, for whatever reason you have been dealt a raw deal, but layering a shitty attitude on top of it doesn't seem to be very productive in alleviating suffering. It robs you of your amazing power, your life force. This is the only life we're most conscious of, so what's the point of feeling like a victim? And yes, I'm sure this is annoying as fuck to hear from someone who occupies a subject position that has so many more resources at their disposal. Trust me, those with more privilege than you are suffering. All you have to do is sit back and watch the fascinating scene unfold. We privileged folks just have more resources to conceal our suffering and sanitize it, compartmentalize it, and hide it from the public sphere. We're master illusionists. We go to therapists and hide behind big houses and have access to food that sustains us, and we go to the gym, free yoga on Tuesdays, to run like hell from our demons, to run like hell from all the pressure of being successful. We suffer from rampant alcoholism, but we're functional alcoholics. You know what they say, work hard, play hard. We can afford to go to nice bars, and sure, I've got a few DUIs, but who's counting, right? Besides, it's a drop in the bucket. I've actually created a separate account just to pay for them, and I have a good lawyer, so it's all hush-hush. Oh, and when the work gets too stressful, I go to my second home in the Poconos and decompress with a few deep tissue massages, and sure, I accept and pay a little extra for the happy ending, but sex with a wife isn't exactly like it was when back in our college years, if you catch my drift. Especially with the kids and all, with the soccer practice, piano lessons. Who has the time? Who has the time? So yes, please know that the privileged folks are suffering. They just have more resources and aren't one bit better than you in any way. 11. Find a way to get over your victim mentality. I know I already talked about this with privilege, but I feel like it deserves its own bullet point. For one thing, victim mentality crosses privilege lines. Some of the most privileged folks have a victim mentality, and it hurts everyone. And remember, if someone has done you wrong, it's because they're suffering, and the best way to deal with it is to not take it personally. And it's certainly tricky, and I don't have all the kinks worked out yet. But somehow you have to figure out how, yes, there are social structures and histories that make life hard as shit. No doubt. But taking on a victim mentality is terribly disempowering. Know that nothing can affect your light if you don't let it. To quote Viktor Frankl, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. End quote. 12. Cultivate a critical consciousness. Having a critical consciousness can be learned. It's like playing the piano. Some people get spit out of the vagina playing Chopin. Others practice their ass off and also attain virtuoso status. You can glean wisdom from everything and anyone, quite possibly without the person you gain it from having any idea what you learned. For example, say you have an overbearing parent telling you that you should do this or you should do that. They think that you are teaching them about doing something, And what you have learned is that when you're a parent, you don't want to be overbearing. You were critical of their advice, but you still gained valuable knowledge. This podcast is a work of fiction. This by no means implies that it isn't useful. It's just that it is impossible for it to be anything but. My goal was to create a quality work of art, and I have no idea how it's going to be used outside of it bringing me some clarity, some emotional freedom. So be critical, yet glean from it a useful nugget. Like the earlier example with the parent, all I can do is act in the world. I have no idea what the effects will be. All I can do, or anyone else for that matter, is act. The effects are just that, effects, not bad or good or anything in between. When someone gives you advice, they are speaking from their viewpoint and their worldview shaped by all kinds of things. The only thing I'm sure of is that we're here to love. That is the challenge. And of course, I could be dead fucking wrong. But it's the only thing that makes sense to me and gets me out of bed each day. But that's my truth, not yours. Trust your gut, but know that your foundational truths will shift, and be open to this. When you cling to your truth, no growth can occur, and you can't pick and choose what you're critical of. You can't be critical of the Republican Party and blindly be a Democrat. Well, you can do whatever you damn well please, but you catch my drift. You can't be hypercritical of the entrenched power dynamics of the government without being critical of how your power dynamics play out in your living room. You can't be critical of the Tea Party without critiquing your own biases and assumptions. Why do you listen to who you do? Why don't you listen to others? Why do I seek external, internal sources for wisdom? Why do I think this is the correct way to do something? Just because a text attains spiritual status, this doesn't mean it's not to be read critically. To critically read something is part of the spiritual practice. And why is it a spiritual practice? Because it's a human practice. And know that a spiritual text or any other text you use to give you insight into the world is no more full of knowledge and wisdom than a credit card receipt. And this is a beautiful thing. As for this podcast, you already know who created it. I make that very clear. But who and what made it possible to do so? What are my glaring cultural biases, my gender biases? What's missing? No creation is complete. It's a work of art, nothing more, nothing less. It is what it is, and that's just wonderful. It didn't mean I didn't derive great pleasure in its creation, in acting creatively. 13. Remain curious. Quite simply, no one can ever have it all figured out. If you meet someone who claims such nonsense, I suggest you run for the hills. Pick a few berries while you're up there. 14. Language matters. This may come to a shock to some people after hearing this podcast that I believe this. But it's not so much the words, but the energy behind the words. It's the fearful, oppressive alpha energy that is so terrible. That's why it is relative. But oppressive energy takes on words that disempower you. When you notice that you are beating yourself up with shitty language, witness this without judgment and replace it with a positive affirmation of yourself. You deserve it. How has oppressing yourself been a brilliant survival strategy for you? For example, say, I appreciate everything you've done for me in keeping me safe in a crazy, violent world, but I don't have use for you anymore. It's time for me to regain my power, and it's time for you to step the fuck aside. 15. Your happiness is not contingent on achieving some sort of goal or being in a particular predicament. Ah, the if-onlys. If only I wasn't poor. If only I got an important job. If only I had a dog. If only I won the lottery. If only I were white. If only my nose was smaller. If only I had a regular yoga practice. If only I could catch my big break. Hey, not all rich people are happy. This is part of the problem. Important jobs tend to be stressful. And besides, by what parameter are you measuring importance? Dogs can be royal pains in the ass, and they have an annoying knack of dying before you. See my comment for rich people concerning the lottery. Not all white people are happy. Again, this is part of the problem. Your big nose is beautiful, as is the rest of you. If your partner suggests you change it so he can continue to be attracted to you, tell him not to worry, that being attracted to me won't be an issue anymore because I wouldn't let you touch my beautiful body with a 10-foot pole. Because if you truly love me, you would love every last thing